I'd always kept my distance from my stepmom. She married my dad when I was 17, and I was off to college not long after. We didn't talk much, not because we didn't get along, but because I didn't want to. She was too young for him, too. Too aware of it. My dad liked to joke that he got lucky with a second chance. I used to think he did too, but now I don't know what to think. I moved back home after losing my job. Temporary, I told myself I'd stay in the guest room, keep my head down, send out resumes, and get out. My dad was barely around traveling meetings or locked in his home office. He left early, came back late, and barely said more than a few sentences over dinner. She was different, present, always dressed, always put together. She made coffee for both of us in the mornings, asked about my job search, teased me when I looked tired. It wasn't anything direct, but it was enough to notice. I'd catch her eyes linger when I walked into the room shirtless. Once I heard her laugh a little too long at something stupid I said. She started making small requests. Help lifting things, fixing things. Harmless stuff. But she always stood too close. Touched my arm. Smiled in a way that didn't feel maternal. I started avoiding the kitchen in the mornings, left my dishes in the sink so I wouldn't have to talk. But then she came to my room one day, just knocked and leaned in with that casual, confident smile. She asked if I could help her with a surprise video for my dad's birthday. Something cute, she said. Just her talking about their memories, I said, sure. Without thinking, she came in later that night with her laptop and a bottle of wine, said she needed help with lighting and framing. She sat on the edge of my bed, tugging at the hem of her shorts legs, crossed tight. She asked me to check how she looked on camera. I looked through the lens and couldn't speak. Her blouse dipped low. She smiled like she knew exactly what I was thinking. She looked straight into the lens and started talking softly about how much she appreciated the men in her life. She looked at me mid-sentence, some more than others froze. She asked me if I thought she looked okay. Said, yeah, quickly. She tilted her head and said, you always say so little. I never know what you're thinking. I laughed it off, but she didn't smile back. She just looked at me for a long time and then said, I'm glad you're here. It's been lonely lately. And then she paused. Would you help me with something else tomorrow? He nodded. I don't know why, but I didn't sleep that night. Something had shifted, and I knew I was already past the point of pretending it hadn't. She knocked on my door the next day around noon, said she needed help picking out an outfit for a charity event. She and my dad were attending next weekend. I followed her to the master bedroom without saying much. She had a few dresses laid out already, but she kept adding more from the closet, holding them up to her body and asking, too much or too plain? Then she turned around and asked, can you zip this one up for me? It was a black dress, tight sleeveless, almost backless. I hesitated but walked over and pulled the zipper up slowly, trying not to touch her skin, which felt warm even without contact. She looked at me over her shoulder and smiled. You're so careful, like I'm made of glass. She turned and faced me, asking how it looked. I muttered that it was fine. She stepped closer. Just fine. She laughed, but her eyes weren't joking. You know, you've grown into yourself. You used to be this quiet, skinny kid. Now look at you. She ran her fingers through her hair and sat on the edge of the bed, still watching me. I told her I was going to grab some water. She stopped me with a light touch on my wrist. Can I ask you something? He nodded. Has anyone ever told you how good you make them feel just by being there? I didn't answer. She sighed and said, your dad doesn't notice things anymore. He used to. Now I could be standing here and nothing, and he'd still be scrolling through emails. I said, I was sure that wasn't true. She laughed again. You're sweet, but don't defend him. He doesn't deserve it. Not from you. She poured a glass of wine and offered me some. I took it because saying no felt like drawing a line I wasn't ready to draw. We sat in silence for a while. She asked me about college, about dating. I gave short answers. She leaned closer and said, do you ever think about what it's like to be really wanted? Her hand rested on my knee for a moment. Too long, I asked her what she was doing. She didn't flinch. I'm being honest. You can walk away, but I don't think you want to. I stared at the floor, heart pounding, trying to think of anything smart to say, but nothing came. Then she stood up. walked to the mirror, adjusted the dress, and looked at me through the reflection. You don't have to pretend with me. I see the way you look at me. I'm not blind. She turned and smiled softly. Just think about it. She didn't wait for me to reply. She left the room, closing the door behind her like it was just another normal day. But I stood there, wine glass in hand, feeling like I just stepped across a line that couldn't be erased. I couldn't sleep. I replayed everything she said, the way she looked at me, the way my body reacted, even when my brain was screaming at me to shut it down. I told myself it was a game, a test, something she'd laugh about later. But deep down, I knew better. It was after midnight when I stepped out into the hallway. I didn't plan it. I wasn't thinking, I just needed air or clarity. Or maybe I was already too far gone. Her door was open slightly, the light was off, but I could hear soft movement inside. Froze. I should have walked back to my room. I should have shut the door, locked it, and gone to sleep. Instead, I stood there, and then I heard her voice. Quiet, almost a whisper. Are you okay? I didn't respond. She opened the door wider. Her silhouette stood there in a thin robe tied loosely at the waist. Couldn't sleep. He nodded. She motioned for me to come in. I did. She sat on the edge of the bed, and I stayed by the door. She looked at me like she already knew what I was feeling. Guilt, want, confusion. You don't have to act like this is a mistake, she said quietly. I don't think it is. I told her this wasn't right. She smiled sadly. Nothing about my marriage feels right anymore. Nothing about this house does except you. She got up and walked over slowly. She didn't touch me, just stood close enough for me to feel her warmth. I'm not asking you to fix anything. I just don't want to feel invisible anymore. I told myself I'd say no, that I'd leave, but I didn't. I let her take my hand. I let her guide me gently, as if we were both afraid of how real this was. Her lips touched mine before I could say anything. I froze, but only for a second. It wasn't wild or rushed. It was slow, controlled. Like she wanted me to know she'd thought about this, like she'd planned it. I didn't stop her. I didn't pull away, I leaned in. The way she touched me wasn't about lust, it felt like need. Her hands trembled once just a little, and that made it worse, made it more real. I didn't feel like a son. I didn't feel like a boy being seduced. I felt like a man making a decision he couldn't take back. I didn't speak. Neither did she. The only sounds were breath and skin and the quiet creak of the mattress. And after, when everything slowed and she rested her head against my chest, she whispered, I've wanted that for longer than I should admit. I didn't know what to say. I couldn't even look at her. Eventually, I got up, dressed, and walked back to my room without a word. The house felt heavier than it had before. I didn't sleep that night either, but not because I was confused, because I already knew I'd do it again. I avoided her the next day. I stayed in my room, skipped meals, didn't even bother pretending to be busy. Every sound in the hallway made my chest tighten. I kept expecting her to knock, to say something, to ask for more, but she didn't. And that silence scared me more than anything. Around dinner, my dad came home. He called out to both of us like everything was normal. Said he was thinking of planning a weekend trip, just the three of us. Like it was some kind of family bonding thing. I could barely look him in the eye. He hugged her from behind in the kitchen and she laughed. Same laugh, same smile, like nothing had changed, but it had. She didn't even glance at me during dinner. Talked to him like she hadn't laid in my bed the night before. Whispered things into my ear that made me question every moral line I thought I had. I wanted to scream at her, at myself, but I just sat there chewing food. I couldn't taste, nodding at stories I didn't hear. That night she found me on the back porch. I didn't hear her come out until she was right beside me. You've been quiet, she said. I didn't respond. She lit a cigarette even though she rarely smoked. I figured you'd feel guilty. I finally looked at her. Shouldn't you? She exhaled slowly. Of course I do, but guilt doesn't undo anything. And I'm not the one who came to my room. I hated how calm she sounded, like she had already filed it away in some part of her mind where it wouldn't bother her. She sat down next to me, closed but not touching. You think I planned this? She asked. That I just waited for the right moment to ruin everything? I stayed quiet. She laughed under her breath. I didn't plan it, but I didn't stop it either. And neither did you. I told her we needed to pretend it never happened. She didn't argue. You can pretend. That's fine. Just make sure you're pretending for the right reasons. She stood up, looked down at me one last time. Don't tell him. Not because I'm afraid, because it'll destroy him. And I don't think you want to carry that. She went back inside. I stayed out there for an hour, maybe more. Felt hollow, like someone had gutted the part of me that used to know right from wrong. I still live here for now. We don't speak about it. She's back to being polite, cheerful, distant. My dad still thinks everything's perfect. I look at him and wonder if I even deserve to be his son anymore. Some nights I still hear,